Former Joburg Mayor Dr. Mpho Phalatse posted a tribute on social media and spoke about seeing the former governor 2 weeks ago. She described him as his usual chippy self. She now joins us live. Dr. Mpho, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. And again, under difficult circumstances. So just 2 weeks ago, you would have been with him. You would have had conversations with him. I don't know how much of that conversation you'd like to share with us this morning, but what's your message to South Africans as well as the Mboweni family this morning?
Well, firstly, good morning to you, to your viewers. What a very sad morning. I'm still in utter shock. Governor Tito Mboweni was a young man. He was young at heart. He looked young. One of my comments on that particular day was that he looked very young. He looked fresh. He was taking very good care of himself. And I can also say that he was very mindful of his health, just in terms of his lifestyle habits. And it really comes as a shock to me that we are here today. Yes, indeed. I started having periodic meetings with him from the time I was mayor, where I had approached him to be one of the people that I walk with. I had a lot of respect for him as a leader. I felt he had a lot of experience, but that he'd also carried himself well with integrity, never compromised on key values and principles that are required of a leader of his caliber. And that's something I really admired. I admired that he didn't mind standing alone if he had to. He was not populist. He always stood on the side of what is right, even if he became unpopular with his own people. And I really admired that. It's a very rare quality in South African politics, and that's why I had identified him as somebody that could speak into my life. And this was one of our meetings. We always met over food. He was a foodie. It wasn't just a social media profile. It's really who he was. And, he really enjoyed his food. And I remember even on that particular day, he said, we're going to have a starter, we're going to have a main, we're going to have dessert. He would take his time. And he was a conversationalist. And we had a lot to catch up on. And he almost had an agenda. He wanted to know what was happening with me in my business life, in my political life, my personal life. It was really like an elder that I would report to, and I'd given him that place to be an authority figure in my life and to be able to speak into my life. We spoke about a lot of things, as I said, across the wide spectrum. One of them was his recent appointment as Chancellor of Medunsa. As you know, I am a product of Medunsa, at least in my undergrad. That's where I studied. And I remember when he got the appointment, he sent me the information, and I got very excited. I thought he was the perfect candidate for the role. Given the history of Medunsa positioned itself as a university to liberate a black child from a disadvantaged background that wanted to pursue a qualification in medicine that would be turned away by various other universities. The Medunsa would give them a chance, and you would know that it's produced some of the best that we have in this country, even specialists. And so he had his first graduation when we had our meeting 2 weeks ago, and he shared about that. He was very proud of his achievement, and he'd really enjoyed conferring those degrees, and he shared, jokes about how the students didn't look at him and how he stopped proceedings at some point and said, hey, I'm not a monster, you can look at me. But just generally, I think some of the lessons from him for me are lifelong, timeless lessons that are rare. He was a sage. He taught me frugality. And I know we often make fun of him, and he was a frugal man. He was not broke, but he was frugal. He was very wise with money, but he did believe in making money, but just spending it wisely. He believed in standing up for justice and for the rights of the masses. I remember one of the conversations we had 2 weeks ago was about a challenge he had with the city of Johannesburg, where he couldn't get past a certain point in processes in a project that he's part of. And I'd said to him, why don't you pick up the phone and call the political leadership and ask them to assist? And he said, I would never do that. He said, I would rather wait and work on the system so that it works for the masses instead of skipping the queue and using my privilege and my influence. And that's the person he was. He was consistent. And I remember in one of our previous meetings, probably 2 years ago, where he had trouble with his visa and he had to travel. And again, I said, why don't you give a call to the Consul General? And he absolutely refused to do that. So that consistency for me says that's really who he was. He was a man of principle. He really stood for what is right, and he cared about the people, and he wanted systems of this country to work for everybody, not just for the politically connected few.
Yeah. Dr. Phalatse, you would then possibly be amongst the few who would last have had a meal with him and a conversation with him. From that conversation, I don't know, did you guys touch at all about the current political landscape? But more broadly, though, what his hopes and aspirations still were for South Africa?
He had huge concerns about where we find ourselves as a country. He sounded to me like somebody who had lost faith in the political system of this country, and he had placed his faith in big business, actually. He believed that business was the solution for where we would like to get to as a country. I would have reached out to him as a politician and based on his experience as a politician, but he was not steering me in that direction at all. You know, he was really short of saying, rather position yourself as a leader in business, because that's where society's solutions are going to come from. So he was really dejected, you know, at government's failure to resolve large-scale societal issues.
Yeah, and his hopes for the nation?
Well, he was hoping that the private sector would be able to take up the baton and do what government has not been able to do. Of course, he wanted to see the nation on a positive growth trajectory, but he really did not see that coming from politics, but rather from business.
Yeah, and now the question is, will we be able to grow this stagnant economy? Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, former mayor of the city of Joburg, and you'd remember that she was also with the Democratic Alliance. Really appreciate your time and paying tribute there to Tito Mboweni.